I want to acknowledge Paula Allen Mears and Cappy Lang. Where is Cappy? I saw her walk in the door. Hi, Cappy. From the University of Illinois at Chicago. Thank you for both being here. I'm sorry you had to go through that fire drill, which happens from time to time. I was saying to a few folks that things have changed rather remarkably in the time that I've served in Congress. When I first got here in 1983, you could literally park your car in front of the Capitol, and there was a man who had lived for several years under the steps of the Capitol on the east side there. He was a homeless veteran with some mental issues, but he lived in a cardboard box and didn't want to go anywhere else, and everybody fed him and took care of him, and times have changed. The security of this building is obvious, and we've had some incidents that have been grim reminders of the vulnerability of this building and the wonderful men and women in the Capitol Police who work here. So I hope you'll understand if the security has been a little more than you're used to, there's a reason for it. This is a good time to be in Washington, and we're debating the State Department and Foreign Operations spending bills, which are going to be interesting. We're having a bit of debate in Congress because of our current deficit situation. In fact, I leave here momentarily to go to a press conference on that whole issue, bipartisan conference with members of the House. We're also having a pretty lively discussion about just how America should engage with the rest of the world. I believe one of the best possible investments is to send more Americans to study abroad. And I think you share that belief. To learn about different cultures and what is best about America, teach what is best about America to people in other lands. I'm singing to the choir with NAFSA. You've been a strong supporter of the Paul Simon Study Abroad bill from the beginning. And before I go any further, I want to acknowledge my friend and the son of Paul Simon, Martin Simon, who is here. Thank you for joining us today. Martin, I don't know how many bow tie lapel pins you have, but I always see you with one.
I've got a handful left, Dick, if you need one.
I think I'm down to a handful myself. We're going to have to, maybe we'll do it as a fundraiser for some good cause to reissue the Paul Simon bow tie pins. But I want to just say that this organization has been critical in bringing together 45 co-sponsors from both sides of the aisle for the bill which Senator Paul Simon really inspired. He was a close personal friend and one of my political heroes, and I'm just honored to hold his seat in the United States Senate. It is hard to imagine, if you knew Paul from Troy, Illinois, later McCanda, Illinois, he kept looking for smaller towns to live in, how he had such a worldview. But then when you hear the story that his mother and father, his father being a Lutheran minister and missionary, actually were in China when Paul was conceived, and he was born in Oregon. So he came to the world with a world vision. I always said somewhere in his body there was a made in China stamp. But he really did. He had a world vision, and it really permeated his view of our role in the United States and what we should do. Let me say a few words about why this bill, inspired by Paul, is so important. We live in an age of global interdependence, trade, finance, and global terror. America's future leaders need to understand other cultures, and they need to speak other languages. American students today are not performing well in either of those areas. Several weeks of studying abroad does wonders for learning the language and culture of a host country. It is said, an old cliche, but I think very valid, you don't appreciate another country until you visit it. You don't appreciate your home until you leave it. And I think that has been the experience we've all had as we've traveled overseas. This is important for our economy. It's important for our security. Listen to what Douglas Daft, the former chairman and CEO of Coca-Cola, said. Coca-Cola operates in nearly 200 countries. We do business in 125 languages. We employ people from 215 different nationalities. Understanding and valuing different cultures has shaped my ability to lead our business. It's an absolute imperative for anyone who works at the Coca-Cola company. Studies abroad programs are also good for our national security. Senator William Fulbright, who of course has the eponymous Scholars Program, was the father of our great study abroad effort. This is what he said in a few words. In the long course of history, having people who understand your thought is much greater security than another submarine. That's not just theory or wishful thinking, it's a fact. As we debate how to cut the deficit, we need to remember the value of smart power and not just military power in keeping America and the world safe. The 9/11 Commission report took a look at what happened a little over 10 years ago to assess how we could be safer. They said, quote, "The U.S. cannot conduct itself effectively in a competitive international environment when our most educated citizens lack minimal exposure to an understanding of the world beyond U.S. borders." Overall, the Commission members gave the United States a D for global literacy. When it comes to global literacy, the United States cannot afford to be a D student. The Paul Simon Study Abroad program can help boost our score to an A. Students who study abroad tend to have higher GPAs, higher graduation rates than those don't. They're some of our best and our brightest. They come back knowing a lot more about the world and are inspired to make a difference. Let me tell you about one of them. Lindsay Strandell is a senior at SUNY New Paltz in New York. She studies foreign affairs and creative writing. Last spring, when the whole world was watching the events in Tahrir Square on TV, Lindsay was watching the revolution from her apartment window in Cairo. She was an eyewitness to one of the most important historical events of our time, and this semester she decided to take another thrilling adventure and be an intern in my office. And she has helped prepare the remarks that are here today. Lindsay, give a big wave to the folks that are here. This is Lindsay Strandell. I'm trying to come to grips with Lindsay's courage in doing what she did to go over to Egypt, and the reluctance of many American students to engage in a similar experience. And what really amazes me is I look around in the world that I live in, you do too, and see how many people from other lands come here. Many of them to go to school, but many of them just to live and go to work and pray that they'll have a chance to stay here for some period of time. You may have an impression in your mind about what a senator from Illinois does for dinner of an evening. Most of my escapades for dinner involve the Subway shop, which is over not too far away on the house side of the hill and half a block from where I live. And I go in there and order different sandwiches, very eclectic menu there. And I come to meet this one young woman who's making the sandwiches there. And she has an accent, and I said, "So where are you from?" She said, "Morocco." And I said, "What are you doing here?" She said, "I'm going to nursing school in Northern Virginia." "Really?" And I said, "How's it going?" She said, "I'm really frightened by the language. I'm learning your language." She's learning our language and going to nursing school. And I thought to myself, what courage it took for her to do that, and now repeat that millions of times. In people that you meet, try to find a cab driver in Chicago from Chicago. You'll meet the subcontinents of most parts of the world and almost every country in Africa when you step into a cab in the city of Chicago. I spoke recently at the law school commencement in Chicago, maybe it's been a year now, and it was Chicago Kent Law School, and they had a master's degree program, and they gave 7 masters in laws, and 5 were to Chinese students who came to the United States to study a master's degree in law. I wonder how many, I think I know the answer, American students are pursuing graduate degrees in China. Probably not that many. It's an interesting thing that these students, because of the great opportunity of being attached to the United States in some part of their education and upbringing, are prepared to risk great things to come here and to struggle with the language and the culture and the money that's associated with it. We have to remind ourselves that as Americans, we're not that far removed from parents and grandparents who made that decision. And the question is whether this generation and the next generation has the courage and the insight to realize this is what tomorrow is going to look like, a more interconnected world. In any given semester, only 1% of American college students are studying abroad. All told, only about 1 in 10 college students study abroad for any length of time before they graduate. The Paul Simon Study Abroad bill proposes to make that number increase by 400% to about 1 million students a year. We still should go even higher, for sure. We also encourage more students from different backgrounds to study abroad. We need to send students who are not the wealthiest in the world on these missions, because they need a chance, and that means some assistance for them to go overseas. And we want to increase the number of nations in which American students study. Today, 3/4 of all American students study in 4 Western European nations. We should be placing students in Africa, Asia, the Middle East, regions increasingly important in our future. NAFSA helped develop bipartisan support for Paul Simon's last crusade, expanding study abroad to American college students. And I know that you're going to help keep the pressure on Congress to create the Abraham Lincoln Study Abroad Commission. You helped to translate the Commission's recommendation into a good bill, and you've helped to maintain bipartisan support for it. I've introduced the bill in the last 2 Congresses, and I'm preparing to do it again. We're weighing a couple policy decisions, which I will consult with you on before we make them. And as soon as we decide, we need your help. My request today is to please keep doing what you're doing. Talk to senators and congressmen about why study abroad is important and how much good we can achieve with a very, very small investment. Host events at home. Make sure people you reach contact their senators and House members. One last thing I want to mention. Thank you, thank you, thank you for supporting the DREAM Act. This has become my passion. Thank you. I started in politics as an intern up here 45 years ago, fresh. I was still in college, and worked for Senator Paul Douglas of Illinois, who's an amazing man. And Douglas did many things in his life, but toward the end of his life, he said, toward the end of his public career, he said, when I was a young man, I wanted to save the world. When I got elected to the United States Senate, I wanted to save America and Illinois. By the end of my career, all I wanted to save was the Indiana Dunes National Lakeshore. And he did. I'm not at the end of my career, but I will tell you, there is no item of higher priority than the DREAM Act for me. And I have seen in the 10 years now since I first introduced it, a dramatic change in these students. They used to wait in the shadows by my car after I gave a speech in Chicago. And they come out and look around and say to me, I'm one of those students, with tears in their eyes. Please help. I don't know what I'm going to do next. And it's changed in 10 years. Now they're in the front row with T-shirts saying, I'm a dreamer. And they stand up and say, let me tell you my story. I am so glad for them that they have reached this point. And I think it's a very effective thing to bring them out of the shadows and let people know who they are. And by and large, they are going to make this a better nation. We are going through a horrible period at this moment when it comes to immigration. It just saddens me, it sickens me, and saddens me that it has reached the point now where it's become such a volatile and negative political issue. It's not new for America. As I may have mentioned, my mother was an immigrant to this country 100 years ago, came from Lithuania to the United States, and I am sure as her mother carried 2-year-old Ona Kutkaita down the steps off the ship in Baltimore, there were people standing, looking, saying, oh my God, not more of those people. That's been what we're all about. We've been waves of immigration, and those already here have resisted new people coming. That's the story of this country and many others. But if you step back and look at this from an historic perspective, we are as strong as we are, as good as we are, though we have our faults and weaknesses. We are as strong and as good as we are because of our diversity as an American family. Who we are. We represent it all right here in this country, and that is a positive thing. These DREAM Act students just need a chance. This is some basic justice. I want to thank NAFSA for being in our corner. Paul Simon retired from the Senate in 1996. He came back here, and the last thing he ever lobbied on was the study abroad program. He asked a very important question then, which is still very pertinent today. How can America be a force for progress in a world we do not even know? By supporting Paul Simon's Study Abroad Act and the DREAM Act, NAFSA is working to make sure Americans know the world better and the world knows us. I thank you for your help. I'm proud to be your partner.